ones. I'm going to continue a little bit from some of the discussion we had last week about the legacy of spiritual teachings. I had talked about why teachings from ancient teachings are still viable and useful now, versus science, where science is always changing and new things are being revealed, so we have new truths. But in the spiritual world, our teachings, while the package that we put them in, teachers bring ancient teachings and truths in different packages. And some packages will resonate with you and some won't. And so our aim is to find the teachings and the package that align with how we work in our lives, how we think, how we orchestrate our lives, so that we can incorporate them and not make them another task in our lives. And so, you can go to the spiritual section of the library or online with Audible or whatever, and you'll see hundreds, thousands of books. But if you take the books and you pare them down to what the essence is, they are the same basic truths about how it is that we are managing this embodied form while we're also managing a heightened divine experience that we're called to have while we're in this embodied form. So what a task that we're being asked to actually do. We're being called to incorporate and merge and integrate these two different dimensions that are equally present in our being, and not to let one go over the other. And so in these teachings, what we can pull out is a way for us to find balance between body, mind, and spirit. And that's what yoga is. So the teachings of yoga, while they're not the only teachings that teach balance, body, mind, and spirit, that's the conscious effort and the aim of the yogic teachings. Yoga means to yoke, yoking to your body, mind, and spirit, and yoking that to the divine. So I will always be pulling back these old teachings because they are as relevant today as they were when they were written. It's really important that we not think, oh, the newest, latest thing is best. It's just another package, and which package works for you? Which one do you relate to? So today I want to share a package that many of you, I'm sure because a lot of you have experience in yoga, can relate to. It's the Pantanjali teachings. Pantanjali was a sage in India, and he wrote many important spiritual texts that are used today. But the one that most has withstood the time test is the Yoga Sutras. And so if any of you have taken a yoga class, I'm sure that your teacher has mentioned one of the aspects of the Yoga Sutras to you. And just by default, if you're in a yoga class, you are doing one of the limbs of the Yoga Sutras. So I'm going to just give you the framework for that today, so that you might work with that over the next week, just with the notion of these possible different ways of entering into our body, mind, spirit, or soul connection, the integration of those three things. And then next week, I'll go into some micro practices that pertain to each of these different aspects. Because the Yoga Sutras have become, over the ages, they have been now used and associated as the foundation for yoga philosophy and practice. That's true in both the East and the West. It's not just in India. In a yoga class you'll take here in the United States, you'll have the Yoga Sutras foundation underneath of what it is that the teacher is sharing. So the way that the Yoga Sutras are written, they are basically a series of 8 limbs. They're called 8 limbs of yoga. And these 8 limbs are the roadmap that guides us in our journey into a soulful and meaningful life. So we're here in this body, and we're meant to have the experience of all of these beautiful sensory experiences that we can have, the tactile and the smelling and the hearing and sight, the beauty of the colors around us. We're meant to have those experiences in a heightened way. But we also have other layers. We're multi-layered beings. And these limbs will take into account how is it that we integrate those layers so that we're having the fullness of this experience. So I'm going to go through each of the 8 limbs and sort of see how that roadmap, that framework might in its own way be a guide for you. And it's interesting for me, one of the things I like to do is to look at this framework and then apply another teacher's teachings and structure as an overlay and look at where do they match up and where are they similar and where are they diverging, and see how that can bring some texture and some color and some light into how I'm imagining this spiritual journey. The thing about these limbs is that they're interconnected. So the teachings are mimicking or giving us guidance as to how it is that we are interconnected in our own individual experience of body, mind, spirit. And then the next layer of how we are interconnected with our family, our circle of friends, and ultimately the entire cosmos. So there's this micro and macro version that's happening simultaneously through these teachings, which I really enjoy, because I think we want to be on all of those levels so that we're not just experiencing our own bubble, but we're not foregoing our own bubble to say, well, I want to be out in the world. We can be both. This is the beauty of being in this embodied form. We have the opportunity to bridge both experiences. So these limbs, each limb is interrelated and interconnected to the next, and they're meant to evolve. So we study and we practice these 8 limbs or 8 areas in our lives all the time, every day. Life is a practice of the soul deepening into itself. We're not trying to learn something new outside. We're just trying to take what is us as a soul and integrate these pieces so that we have the fullness of who we are that we're offering to ourselves and to the world. So we're soul deepening, and it's an evolution. Where we are today is not where we were yesterday or last month or last year. We're collectively and individually evolving every moment. We know that. So these 8 limbs, these words you probably will have heard, I'll just list the 8, and then I'll go through each one in a brief way with us. They're the yamas, the niyamas, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. I'll post all of this on our toolbox, so you'll be able to access it easily if you want to review it. So why is this important to us that we learn about these 8 different limbs? It's important to us because if we can't integrate all of ourselves into the whole, how can you become whole? Imagine that these pieces of us, it's like a puzzle, and they're spread across this puzzle board. And if we can't get them into the full picture, we don't know what the picture of ourselves and our humanity looks like. And we're always searching for a little missing piece of this puzzle. So this is important to us in that we want to be able to find the tools to bring us back into that puzzle forming its own completeness. We each have the potential to be complete and full in our own way. We do it differently. We're each our own puzzle. But if you pull the pieces back, there's a certain beauty that comes together that's revealed in the fullness of the picture of us that isn't revealed in the pieces. So if we're only living in the pieces of us, we miss out on the fullness of the whole of us. It's a trifecta, our body, mind, spirit relationship. It's like a stool, one of those little stools that has the 3 legs on it. If you take one leg away, it won't stand up at all. We need all 3 aspects. We need body, we need mind, we need our spirit, our soul experience, just how to bring them together. So let's unpack these a little bit. The yamas, these are the ethical principles that clarify our relationship with the world and everything in it. So this is the external experience of us related externally into the world. What is our relationship with everything from the planet to individuals, to our family, to our community? How are we finding the connection and the interconnectedness? I think there's a whole book by the Dalai Lama, His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, on interconnectedness. It might even be called interconnectedness. That's the interdependence, I think is the term he uses, that we can't exist without being dependent upon one another and connected with one another. So the yamas are these are the ethical practices that help us to understand our relationship with other, not with ourselves, but with other. And once we agree to the interconnectedness and the interdependence on one another, we'll see life through a different lens. Of course we do. and how we experience life changes because we start to be able to experience it through other people's experience as well. The yamas are broken down into 5 practices, and I'm just going to briefly go through these. Ahimsa, which is a very common Buddhist term you'll hear, means do no harm to yourself or others. That one's quite obvious. Satya, honesty. Satya means honesty to self and to others. Until we practice honesty to ourselves first, how many times do we tell ourselves a story so that we can have something be the way we want it to be, but it's not really the truth of how it is? We've talked about this a lot in our gathering, that being honest and being willing to see how things really are allows us the platform and the foundation to then go into what is the healing that's required. But as long as we take the story of how we want it to be, we never have the opportunity for the same healing, because we've changed what we believe is reality. We haven't changed reality, but we will not address life in the same way until we're willing to see it honestly. Not seeing a situation for the truth of it is our way of withdrawing. I can't handle it, so I'm going to withdraw and make up a different story so I don't have to be in the truth of it. But we don't do ourselves justice in that movement. That's not helpful to us. The third of the 5 practices is asteya. It means no stealing, but in the more expanded version, it means it's not just objects, stealing something from someone, it's stealing someone's dignity or the beauty of the planet or the truth of the moment. In the ashram, Sadhguru asks us to not even pluck flowers off of a tree. He said that's removing a piece of the beauty of the tree. The tree has a cycle. And you think, well, the flower is going to die, and if I can sustain it in some water and do whatever, that's your whole fabrication of how it is you want the world to be. The tree has its own rhythm, and its rhythm is it will bring forth whatever it brings forth. That will have a life cycle, and then that will finish. And us interjecting ourselves into it, I mean, this is an extreme example, but us interjecting ourselves into that cycle is the same as us telling someone what to do. It's in the world of the Eastern tradition, it's a karmic experience. You're actually adding karma to your life by taking on something's rhythm and cycle and interjecting yourself into it. So stealing, asteya, stealing anything from someone's beauty, how they are in the world, or from their dignity of how they show up, and you somehow diminishing them. When we diminish a situation or a person, we're stealing from them. So it's not necessarily a physical object. Brahmacharya, most people will relate brahmacharya as being that of sexual energy, somebody giving up, having a life without any sex and responding by removing themselves from those kinds of relationships. But it's actually creative energy. Sex is just one version of creative energy. So brahmacharya is wise use of creative energy. So how are we using our energy into the world? Where are we hoarding it? Where are we releasing energy that's not needed to be released? So both in protecting it and also in giving it away appropriately. Brahmacharya, being wise about the use of our energy. And aparigraha is non-possessiveness. This is the 5th practice of the yamas. It means moving from greed to generosity of spirit. So we aren't holding on to things. We're letting situations, emotions, and physical things pass through us. When we let something pass through us, the generosity of that comes back in multitudes back to us. But when we hold on to it for fear we won't be able to get it back again. If I give up this amount of love or this amount of whatever it happens to be, I might not have enough. That possessiveness, it's a big topic in the Buddhist tradition. The second of the 8 limbs is niyamas. And the difference between the yamas and the niyamas is that the yamas are our relationship to the external, and the niyamas are our relationship to our internal world. So the niyamas are also broken down into 5 habits or 5 disciplines. The first one is saksha. It's the purity and cleanliness to keep the energy of our body, mind, spirit flowing in harmony. So it's our daily practices, which we'll talk about next week, of how we eat, how we breathe, how we purify ourselves, so that as we offer ourselves to ourselves and into the world, but to ourselves first, we have a purity of our essence. The second of those 5 practices is santusha. It means contentment and gratitude. And that one is easy to imagine. How we practice being in gratitude for everything in our lives, even the things that feel difficult or challenging or unpleasant. That we don't, in the Buddhist tradition, we don't differentiate between something being good and something being bad. They're all life experiences, and having at least gratitude for them. Maybe contentment is a little bit of a stretch, but how do we seed contentment and gratitude as a natural resting place for ourselves? Not something that we're going out to get, but that's actually our inside level of the way we are. It's the foundation from which we move. The next of the practices is tapas. That means discipline. The tapas are our disciplines. They can be your yogic practices or other life disciplines, whether it's your exercise program or your routine that you've created, having a discipline that is in the effort of the integration of body, mind, spirit. And we'll talk about those next week in more depth. Sadvayaya, it's self-reflection and self-study. So this is, what are we doing to bring in information and wisdom that is part of that is flourishing inside of us, and that is allowing us to have new thoughts and new revelations, insight. How are we offering ourselves insight? And some of that can come from self-reflection, what is already happening internally, and some of that is from using external sources. And the last of that is the Ishvara Pradinhara, and it's devotion or surrender. How much are we surrendering to life? That question. The third of the limbs is asana. That's the physicality. We all know the asanas of yoga, aligning ourselves within our own body and our body with the universe, the alignment of the cosmos. The fourth is pranayama, the focus of the breath. Of course, we've talked a lot. Siddhi leads us in pranayama every week, but how we use the breath as a central core piece of how our experience of body, mind, spirit is happening. And we'll talk about that more next week as well. The fifth of the limbs is the pratyahara, and that is the withdrawing of the senses. So teaching ourselves, this is a very big practice in India, teaching ourselves to move back from the experience of all of our 5 senses when we want to do that, because in that state of being withdrawn, there is a quietude and an internal peace. The distractions of our senses, which can be beautiful, and distractions not even maybe the proper word, because there's a beauty to what our senses bring. But in the state of withdrawing from it, we have an opportunity to experience a really deep reservoir of quietude. So pratyahara, we'll talk more about that. The sixth is dharana, and that is a concentration on one object. We've used it in our trataka, candle gazing, when we've done that, where we focus our intention and our vision on one object, and it takes us into a slightly diffused state where our eyes are actually seeing things in a way that things are out of focus. That single-minded and pointed concentration. The seventh is dhyana, meditation, a state in which we experience a sacredness through this deeply focused awareness. So we talk about awareness over and over again, about the awareness that we're trying to stay in the place and space of awareness in our lives. And the last of these limbs is samadhi. And this is the culmination of the prior 7 that bring us into an attunement with ourselves, where we are so interconnected internally and then to the external world that we're in this place of where people will call joy or bliss. And in this place, clinging disappears, the mind constructs of control, fear, over-organizing, all of those things fall away. So this is the culmination of this practice. So each of these limbs gives us an opportunity to look at a different part of ourselves, or our body, mind, spirit integration, so that we can look at ourselves as a whole and start to tend to all of those. We've talked about so many of these, but I want us to look at it as a fullness of a practice. So how we might bring all of these aspects together. So next week, we'll look at micro practices associated with each of these 7 that will help us culminate in the 8th state, the 8th limb of samadhi, as just a way of walking through our day. Not another whole practice where you have to sit on the cushion and do something another half hour or something's happening. This is a way of us to be present in our daily life, but aware that we're integrating. It's an awareness of integration. It's not just happening. We have an intentionality around being integrated. And how do we pull that intentionality together? What does that look like? And it looks different for each of us. We have to each draw our own roadmap, but here are some guideposts that we can use, a template that we can then place in the pieces that make the most sense to us and that we will be able to do. It doesn't make sense to start a program or a practice that you aren't going to do because it doesn't suit your lifestyle or your interests or where you are in your spiritual journey. You have to meet yourself where you are. Let's go forth. Have a beautiful week.
Thank you, Nirmala. So while you were speaking, I was like thinking, okay, what are we doing today? Because I didn't have anything prepared and I wanted to be with your teachings. So, and then I got reminded that there's a beautiful meditation where you take the 4 fingers, the tip of your 4 fingers, and you place them right into the center line of your forehead. So all fingertips have to touch. So imagine a line here. Your thumb is extended. Your right arm goes forward and your left hand and your left hand is cupped a little bit like a bagger. So in this posture, you're stimulating all your 7 energy centers. We start with long, deep breathing. And I wanted to remind you to do the 5-5 breath. Inhaling for 5, exhaling for 5. And just be with that while you're sitting in this posture. If your left arm gets a little tired, then rest it for a moment and then bring it up again. We stay in the posture. We take a deep inhalation. We suspend our breath. We bring our arms overhead and open our mouth, and we exhale and we shake our arms. Inhale through your nose. Exhale, open mouth. One more time. And then our hands come back to prayer pose. We are with our breath for a moment. Allowing ourselves to feel ourselves in our wholeness. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Thank you for joining, for being with us, being here for each other. We see you next week. Namaste. Love to all of you. There's one chat. The song will be shared on our site. Yeah.